Welcome to the Stormsurf Video Surf Forecast for the week starting Sunday, August 31st. Brought to you by Vunabaka.com, a new water-based and surf residential community in the island of Fiji. First, we take a look at the significant wave height charts for the North Pacific Ocean. A rather placid pattern has taken over. No swell development is currently indicated. Let's put this in motion, see what happens. As we move through time, the same pattern basically continues. Little bit of energy tries to push off of Japan, theoretically on Wednesday. Not a whole lot happens. Then theoretically also some tropical development forms off the Philippines later Thursday and builds some, makes it to about Japan, and then hints of possibly starting to move to the northeast. But who knows? The models are not very good at monitoring or forecasting tropical systems, certainly not a week in advance. But it does leave us a little bit of hope that perhaps the West Pacific will start waking up soon. Next, we take a look at the South Pacific. Same deal, significant wave heights, not a whole lot going on, sort of this broadish fetch of about 18-foot seas here, working its way under New Zealand up to about South Tahiti, with a smaller area fetch here. There's actually some 30-foot seas here about 24 hours ago. That was on Saturday, but that is since dissipated. Let's go take a look in the details now. First, we'll examine jet stream level winds. These are winds up about 30,000 feet. These winds help support the formation of storms in lower levels of the atmosphere and also help direct those storms' path once they form. What we're looking for is troughs, that is winds bowing to the north in the southern branch of the jet stream. This is the northern branch of the jet stream. Really doesn't have a whole lot to do with storm formation. It's down here in the lower reaches of the hemisphere that we're really looking for activity. And this right here is sort of what would almost be considered a trough, with 140 knot winds coming into it, but really it's the tail end of what was a much larger trough that filled first the West Pacific and then the Central Pacific and generated solid storm activity and seas and swell, which are all radiating towards Hawaii and California and hitting Tahiti at this very moment. Let's put this into motion, see what's going on. So we see sort of a zonal flow here, a little bit of a trough trying to get going into Monday. But there we go. There's a little bit better fetch, or not really a fetch, but a pulse of northerly winds at about 130 knots. Maybe good to help support a little something there at the surface, but that doesn't last long. And then things really get even weaker and not a whole lot of wind energy going on over the Pacific by about Wednesday evening. We get into this kind of a zonal flow, just flat west to east, no troughs, and that's not good for the to support gale development until we get to about Sunday. Now we're almost 7 days out, not very believable, but 140 knot winds projected. It looks like a trough starting to form under New Zealand. That would be good news if it were to happen. That would support gale development in this region and perhaps another swell. Let's go take a look down at the surface. So if you recall from the significant wave height chart, there was this sort of fetch of sea, or actually an area of seas going like this with a bit of a gale here. And certainly we can see that in the surface level wind charts. This is surface level winds and pressure. Notice high pressure for the most part locked over New Zealand. Actually it circulates this way. And then lower pressure down here circulating this way, of course driving a gradient that is a difference in pressure, a compression of the isobars between the two pressure differences in pressure resulting in wind. It is the difference in pressure at the ocean surface that creates winds, and winds of course create seas. Seas, as they radiate away from this fetch area, create swell, which of course generates surf. All right, so 30 knot winds, little pocket of 45 knot winds there. We saw the significant wave height chart. We saw seas in this area, but not enough to generate swell to radiate 5,000 miles up into California or 4,000+ into Hawaii. So we'll continue on our search. Another little pocket here, 40, 45 knot winds. Let's see how long it lasts. A little bit here. This looks like it's actually aimed pretty well towards Chile, not so much towards the United States at all. Another little pocket tries to fire up here on Tuesday night, quickly fades out. maybe a little something, but it's the zonal flow pushing everything flat west-east. You want fetch pushed, aimed more to the north towards California, Hawaii, etc., if you expect to see surf. And then we're into Thursday. A gale tries to get organized here. I'll call it more of a primer gale, maybe setting the stage for something better in the future. This is on Friday. And then we come into, we're into Saturday. Sunday, there we go. Now look at this, 45 knot winds, aimed pretty well to the north. That's what you want to see in the right area, high pressure here. That sets up a nice pressure gradient, and again, creating those winds, and that creates swell. And that goes on pretty good. It doesn't push too far to the north, but the fetch itself is aimed north into Sunday night. So, possible area here where right now it kind of looks like a dead zone, but maybe some hope a week out. Let's go take a look down at the wave model charts. So first we're going to go back in time because there's a storm we want to examine. We're back to Monday night a week ago, the 26th of August. Small area down here that we're looking at. Put it into motion. Notice 32-foot seas. This in and of itself is not significant. We'll call this a primer gale in that it roughs up the ocean surface, it creates seas, 32-foot seas to be exact, which are not insignificant, but not really what we're looking for. But 32-foot seas is certainly roughing up the ocean surface in that general area, and then things kind of fade out. But here's the real deal. Starting Wednesday afternoon, that was the 27th of August, a new gale comes right behind it, the exact same area, and we looked at some of the satellite data, 55 knot plus winds, 60 knot winds in this area, and that instantly grabs onto the large rolling sea state that was already in place, generating 42, 43-foot seas, and then by Wednesday evening, we're into the 48-foot range, and that is actually pretty good. And we'll get into pretty reasonable chance that that was legit too, and we'll get into that in a minute. And then we come into later Wednesday evening, we're still 46, 47-foot seas, and then the system fades out into almost Friday morning. So let's go back, do a little examination here at the peak of the storm. Here we go. Relative to Hawaii, notice the wind and swell vectors are kind of going almost 45-degree angle to the Great Circle paths up into Hawaii. That means most of the energy is bypassing Hawaii. Still, Hawaii is expected to get some swell, but just not a whole lot. What we're more interested in here is, we'll start with Northern California. That's about the 205, the 203 is the cutoff for the shadow for Tahiti. So we'll actually go back. There we go. So the core of this thing was shadowed by Tahiti until it got into about Thursday for Northern California. But still, on the Great Circle paths, which is a good sign. Relative to Southern California, basically the same sort of deal, shadowed for the core, but then it pulls out a little bit earlier and pushes a little bit more energy. And notice it's pushing right up the Great Circle paths. There's the angle, there's the Great Circle angle, there's the swell angle, basically right where you want it to be. So that swell that is expected to arrive late next week into next weekend, something to look forward to. And with the nearly 48-foot seas, there's a reasonable chance there could be some long period forerunners, something to look forward to, indeed. Anyway. And then we talked about a small system that followed that directly, 32-foot seas on Friday night into Saturday. Actually a little peak there, maybe 36-foot, almost 38-foot seas, but notice a really small fetch area. Basically what's going to happen is the swell from this system will just sort of get buried in the previous swell and just sort of add on to the length of it. So, there could be a little pulse, but not much. It'll be basically just continue the life of the swell for an extra 24 hours or so. And with that, here we are into now current state. Not a whole lot going on. Notice, here we go, first off, little 32-foot seas, but we're at the 120 west mark here, and basically maybe sideband swell for Southern California, but really this is more of a chilly system and not much of a system at that, because it dies out and wasn't very big. Another little system tries to get going on Wednesday, 26, 28-foot seas, very unimpressive, and things just sort of dribble along into, now we're into next weekend, Saturday, and then here comes that system we were looking at, 32-foot, no, actually that was the primer, and here comes the main one. we're 32, 34 foot seas. The deal here on this one, though, is it's for the most part, where is that? That's about the 211 there. So that's in the shadow relative to Tahiti, relative to Northern California and Southern California. And the same issue with Hawaii. It's actually aimed reasonably well up the... Hawaii might do okay on this one. But again, it's if it forms. That's 7.5 days out. Who knows? But something to look forward to. Certainly better than nothing on the charts. All right, that said, let's go take a look at some long-term projections, specifically El Nino, Southern Oscillation Index, and all those good things. All right, here we go. Southern Oscillation Index. Difference in pressure between Darwin, Australia, and Tahiti. Negative numbers represent the active phase of the MJO, the Madden-Julian Oscillation, which always supports storm development in the winter in the Gulf of Alaska and the Dateline region, but here we are in summer. So what we're really looking for is a long run of negative numbers, which certainly we see basically 30 days worth of negative numbers. So that says at a minimum the active phase of the MJO is occurring, and if that holds up over time, then it suggests that maybe El Nino is coupling with the atmosphere. So 30-day average also continually dropping down to almost 11 now. This is a very good sign. Again, this is more suggestive of the MJO than El Nino, but if the 90-day average continues to go negative and it's finally down to almost -6, that's a good sign. That suggests that maybe El Nino is finally getting some inroads into the atmosphere, and that the warm waters at the ocean surface are starting to help rearrange the circulation in the upper atmosphere. But we've got a ways to go. This is not deep by any means. We would want to see this at -10 and holding for several months. We're not there yet. And here is the 30-day Southern Oscillation Index average. We had a bit of a dip. Almost we thought we had El Nino going in the summer of 2012. But of course that, like once we got into August, September, just completely dissipated. Things went neutral. We almost went back into La Nina. Then starting January, February, March, massive dip in the SOI. This was associated with a large Kelvin wave that was generated. Westerly wind bursts in the West Pacific. We thought we were on a roll to almost a super El Nino. And then, of course, the bottom fell out. Everything went positive again. And now here we go into another protracted run down. We're almost approaching the same level here. And this was the deepest it had been in years, since the El Nino of 2009, 2010. So to get a second run down to here would be a very good thing, and we are close. We're at, what, -11 or so, and we need to get to about -14, so not too far off. This is good news. Next, we'll take a look at surface level wind anomalies. These are anomalies, differences in wind from normal. Okay, and what we're looking for, so there's the Philippines there, this is the date line in about here, and here's the equator. And what we're looking for, this is what we'll call the Kelvin wave generation area, in here, westerly anomalies. So we're looking for yellows, oranges, reds, pretty much in this area here. And this is just the past about the past week, and we're not really seeing it. It's trying to get a little bit of traction, but we've kind of been stuck in, I wouldn't call it an inactive phase, but it's certainly not an active phase, and it's not anything really, just kind of neutral. So the past week has not been particularly productive or conducive to the support of Kelvin wave generation. So here we go. Here's the current. This is up at the 850 millibar level, which supposedly translates well down to the surface. There's Australia, Philippines. So the area we're looking at is about 140, couple degrees either side of the equator, out to about somewhere in here. And right now it's looking like pretty much neutral, if not light easterly anomalies. And not even really easterly. I mean, there's a lot of variation in here. It sort of, goes back and forth day by day, but nothing too significant. Neutral anomalies across the equator as of current. And then we go a week out, and basically the same sort of thing. A little hint of easterly anomalies way out here. In the main Kelvin wave generation area, nothing. A little bit of westerly anomalies here. Try to get going into about 170 west. That's good. But they don't get a whole lot of traction. So basically just this kind of neutral nothing kind of a pattern going on even as we go into the east into the Galapagos. So no real support there. Taking a look at the outgoing long-wave radiation charts, these are also roughly equivalent to winds and active and inactive phases. The yellow and oranges are the inactive phase of the MJO, which would be easterly anomalies. We don't see that on the statistical model, just kind of a neutral pattern. The good news here is this model suggests that about 2 weeks out, we start moving into the active phase of the MJO. One would assume westerly wind anomalies would be associated with that. Then we go look at the dynamic model. Now the good news here is it shows actually the inactive phase, the exact opposite of what the statistical model showed up here. But the good news is this has been consistently showing the inactive phase and far stronger in this, and just in the past 24 hours it's really just dropped out to nothing. So we suspect that we're at least going to go neutral, if not maybe towards the active phase. And here's the next part of the equation that makes us suspect that. Is this the upper level model as of today, 40-day, highly unreliable, but it has been consistently showing the inactive phase. This is in the upper levels of the atmosphere. So the yellows, oranges suggest non-support for the development of precipitation, which is typically associated with the inactive phase of the MJO. It appears that by, let's say the next 5 days, the inactive phase is gone and the active phase starts materializing. And these phases typically run for about 3 to 4 weeks. 3 weeks inactive phase, 3 to 4 weeks active phase, back and forth. But during El Nino, if El Nino were in play, they get very much just muted and there isn't much of anything going on. It'll show on here, but the reality is you get kind of this neutral thing and the trades just dissipate. But that's actually good news. So anyway, we're diverging here a bit. So by the 10th of September, we should see the inactive phase in play, and that should roll out all the way till about the 10th of October, and then another inactive phase supposedly happens. So this is good news. We're out of the inactive phase that was supposed to happen the whole month of August, which never happened, and the whole month of July, which was supposed to happen strong and never happened. Regardless of what the models said, it's been kind of neutral with light westerly wind anomalies. So we're moving into a more favorable zone now. And one last little piece of evidence here. This is surface level winds, surface level water temperature. These are the actual winds and actual water temperatures. Here's the anomalies. And they now show weak westerly anomalies. It's been kind of neutral. There was actually a westerly wind burst almost the first 3 weeks of August, which was great. So regardless of the inactive-active phase thing, there was a full-on westerly wind burst going on. Not a strong one, but enough. Kind of went neutral. And now here we go. Westerly anomalies trying to get a little bit of a foothold here. And since we're at it, water temperatures. This is like the worst-case water temperature scenario. It shows half-degree anomalies here, 1-degree anomalies here, and kind of neutral here. The suspicion is this is the last of the upwelling phase of the current Kelvin wave. There was a massive Kelvin wave that hit, when was it, May, June, peaked out sometime in June, and then July and August it basically was fading, and we thought water temperatures would go back to zero. They haven't done that. But a little bit of cold water is bleeding up from, sort of after a Kelvin wave blows through, we get some cold water, and we'll talk about that in a minute. And that's what this is basically here. And this is the worst we've seen it of anything, and I think it's a bit overstated. So anyway, that's that. So here is actual sea surface temperature anomalies, differences from normal for this time of year. Notice, still warm water piled up Galapagos, in the Ecuador, Peru area. Still little pockets of cool anomalies, but much, much better than even, here we can go back a couple of days and look. See how it was? We're back into July, end of July. This was the upwelling phase of the Kelvin wave, generating those cool anomalies. Notice how it's pretty much all filled in now, and we're back to where we were. And this is most interesting because we thought the upwelling phase of the Kelvin wave would just kind of wipe all this out. No, it hasn't happened. The suspicion is that trades are way less than normal in this area. Lots of surface warming going on. Of course, notice the warming here off of Baja up into California. Anybody that's been in the water in the past month knows how warm the water temperatures are, even up into the Point Reyes area, well above normal. And of course, all this warm water here, that has has got to do something to the atmosphere and warm water in this area. This is the Kelvin wave generation area. So the only cool anomalies that are this pocket here. They've been here all year. It doesn't look like they're going anywhere, but they haven't made any real incursion up into a couple of degrees either side of the equator. Now, this is not a huge El Nino signature, but it certainly is something that, since it's been here for months now, has got to be having some impact on the atmosphere. And as we move more into fall, one would expect that that impact would start to become noticeable, specifically in the enhancement of the jet stream and support for storm development in the Gulf of Alaska and Dateline regions. So we're looking for that. Otherwise, you know, it's basically a interesting warm pattern in the northern hemisphere. Not so warm in the southern hemisphere. Pockets of warmness, but nothing significant. So that's that. Next, we take a look at subsurface temperatures. That is below the surface. Here's actual water temperatures. So here we go. Here is the date line here. This is the western side of the Kelvin wave generation area. This is roughly the Galapagos here. So we're looking across on the equator, a couple degrees either side of the equator, from true north to true south, and looking at depth. And these little X's are, of course, the sensors on the TAO buoys, and they're strung in lines across the equator north to south. So here's the part we're really interested in. Subsurface temperature anomalies. Notice 2-degree anomalies here, and this is the conservative view. This is a Kelvin wave, another Kelvin wave in flight. So they're generated in this area. Warm water develops here at depth, starts moving east, and then eventually, about 2.5 months later, gurgles up off the Galapagos and off of Ecuador and feeds the warm pool that we saw in the previous images, which then advects off to the west and really fills in the area from about 170 to about 120. That's called the Nino 3.4 region, and that's where you want to see warm water development. Here's another view of that. So this is all sort of model data. The sensors are there, but then there's different models that they use to sort of fill in the gaps. So here you go. Here's warm water coming down in the Kelvin wave generation. Here's the core of it. Notice we got 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. This model suggests 3-degree anomalies here. Moving to the east, notice this little pocket here of cool water. This is the last of what we believe is the upwelling phase of the previous Kelvin wave that's being bled out right now. And they're sort of like bleeding the brake lines, and that's that cool water we saw on the previous chart at the surface. That's going to bleed out, and then here we go, more warming coming behind that. And this is about 2 months worth of warming right here at a minimum. So that's what we're looking forward to, is the leading edge of this Kelvin wave starting to work its way up into here, pushing surface temperatures even warmer than they currently are. And one more piece of evidence to support that theory or that outlook: satellite data, surface height anomalies. Height anomalies suggest warm water at depth when the ocean surface is bulging up, and we're talking not a lot, 5 centimeters here, maybe a little pocket of 10 there, but this is the Kelvin wave generation area, suggesting lots of warm water at depth. And notice it's bleeding its way east. This finger has been getting longer and longer. It's going to work its way into the Galapagos here in another month to month and a half, and then again we'll see warming in this area here, or we'll try this another. So this is the area where we're looking at right here, and specifically out to about 170, and really it's 170. This area right here is what they call the Nino 3.4. Notice it's half a degree, maybe a couple of pockets, and maybe 1 degree here and there, and some cooler pockets. We expect that this Kelvin wave will start warming this area here when it hits, and then there are trades in this area still. That warm water will start backfilling into here, and that's really the hallmark of El Nino. It's not like there isn't piles of warm water all around, but we really need it concentrated in this area. That's what seems to sort of shift the Walker circulation this way, and then really start having an impact on the jet stream. We don't expect a major El Nino to result this year. Otherwise, you look at all the historical records, we're not going to get into it, but water temperature would be way above normal if some sort of a super El Nino was going on. But modest warming, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. Let's go take a look at the forecast. So here's the forecast. This is from the CFS version 2 model. This is NOAA's version. There's multiple models, but they all sort of suggest some flavor of the same thing. So here we go. We're talking about 0.6 degree anomalies in October, which is considered El Nino. Anything over 0.5, I think it's for 3 months. And then by the time you get into January, February, March, we're in about the 1 or 1.05 degree range, which is now actually, this is the prediction. So the El Nino of 2009-2010 was a 1.4, so we're below that. So a mild El Nino. The million-dollar question, will this have any impact on rain in California? So the general thought is in this classification of El Nino, it's a 33% chance. Less than normal rain, a 33% chance of normal rain, and a 33% chance of greater than normal rain. So the other way to look at this, there's a 67% chance of normal rain or enhanced rain, or a 33% chance of less than normal rain. Who knows? But the good news is, if this warming occurs, for sure that should have some positive impact on surf and storm development over the dateline and into the western Gulf of Alaska. And from a surfing perspective, that's the end we're looking for. We actually don't want to see some massive spike in water temperatures, but rather a mild spike. And the milder the spike, the greater the odds that it would go for 2 or 3 years. And then you get this sort of multi-year push that goes, and you get precipitation with that. And that's sort of the end game that we're looking for. And normally it culminates in some sort of a real El Nino push. But then once you get El Nino, what follows the very next year is La Nina, and you're back into a drought mode. So the milder version of this is probably the preferred outcome, both for surf and for rain. We'll have to see, though. Who would believe a model that goes out 6 months? It's a nice tease. It's interesting to talk about. I wouldn't bet money on it. And then finally, one last diversion here. We're actually going back. This is the storm that we saw last Wednesday, Thursday. That was the 27th, 28th of August. We did get one good Jason 2 satellite pass over the storm, 18Z on Thursday. And this is interesting. The model here suggested 38-foot seas at the core. But notice these are all gray lines in here and covering the same area. Average seas we just picked 15 of the highest right in here, and that was 41.2 foot, and a single reading within that region was up to 48.5 feet. Okay, so this is right about, this is at 15Z, this is the 18Z run of the model. The previous run here had 40-foot seas right in here, so certainly the models did a good job of handling the storm. If anything, they downplayed the strength of it. So we're looking to see a reasonably healthy swell produced from this system. We're talking to folks in Tahiti now, looking to get some real-time information from them. So the wrap-up here is swell on the way, coming late week into the following weekend from a storm deep in the South Central Pacific. The models handled it well. Beyond that, maybe something a week out, nothing significant, but at least a little dribbles. Right in the dead zone now between summer and fall, waiting for the North Pacific to wake up, really waiting for the tropics to warm up over near Japan, the Philippines, and to have one of those systems recurve, come across the dateline and blow up. We do not expect that to happen, but it would be nice if it did. So a bit to look forward to, and of course El Nino appears to be continuing its long plod towards developing. It's a slow mover, but it appears to be going in the right direction. It certainly isn't dying out as of this moment in time. And again, we'd like to thank our friends at VunaBaka.com. Check out their website, VunaBaka.com. Great construction project going on there. If you're interested in getting property in Fiji, this is the way to do it. So that's it. We'll do this again next week, same time, same place. In the meantime, get your board, go surfing. There's going to be waves. Enjoy it, and keep your fingers crossed for something better in the future. Thanks. See you next week.